I love a good RPG. Something about the ability to immerse myself in a world is so satisfying when I'm in the right mood for it, and frankly, it only gets better when it's an adult RPG. Here's a list of 10 adult RPGs that I consider to be absolute gems, the best of what's currently available that I've played. Number 10. Demon King Domination. The ultimate climax of any fantasy RPG is the final boss, the player character versus the big bad evil terrorizing the realm. Demon King Domination is a fascinating short-form RPG that plays with the traditional RPG formula in two ways: skipping straight to the climax, and letting you play as the titular Demon King Malos. The game revolves entirely around the final battle between Malos and Diane, using a combat system that blends a typical RPG with elements of rock, paper, scissors of all things. For what the game is, it works very well. It couldn't carry a whole RPG with how simple it is, but it's not trying to carry a whole RPG. Diane follows set patterns across 5 different phases of the battle, and figuring out those patterns is key to defeating her soundly. This is a very well-planned way of setting up the fight, because the method of getting the 3 different endings is to either fail at distinct points, or finish the whole fight in victory. It allows the player a quick way to fill out the rest of the gallery upon completion. You know the patterns, now it's just a matter of countering them for a relatively quick win. The adult scenes are simple, but fun, fully voice acted in a very enjoyably hammy way that almost makes it feel more like playful roleplay. An interesting twist to each of the endings is that Diane never wins. Even if you lose in the very first phase, she falls victim to subterfuge between Malos and his generals. I'm honestly not sure how to feel about it. Really, I suppose having an ending where Diane beats the Demon King and there's no point at all would have been a rather dull climax for such a short experience, but I think the general feel of the game would be very different if it's allowed Diane at least one victory. She's earned it after all. Overall, Demon King Domination is a short and sweet experience that's definitely worth playing. It's enjoyable, but might leave one yearning for just a little bit more. Number 9. Despair Labyrinth, Ransom of Ellen Soar. In a word, Despair Labyrinth is ambitious. Choosing one of 8 different protagonists, you go through the titular labyrinth and follow the same general plot beats with the end goal of saving the kidnapped princess. For an RPG Maker game developed by a single person, it's a very interesting way to handle character choice. The important events are the same, but each character is their own person with their own goals, leading to vastly different situations along the way. Playing through each character's route creates a surprisingly interwoven tapestry, where seemingly innocuous events turn out to be significantly more important for another character. Despair Labyrinth has very standard erotic scenes. Being a labyrinth filled with bandits, there's of course plenty of ways that scoundrels have fun with their chosen protagonists, but the game does try to shake things up a bit, with monsters even a few girl-on-girl scenes. The scenes themselves are rendered in 3D through what seems to be something like koikatsu. Despite immediate appearances, it's still quite pleasant to look at, even if it does somewhat hamper the potential imagination, like the gargoyles just being strange gray people with wings tacked on. The writing elevates it somewhat, with each character having a very overt personality that comes through quite well when push comes to shove. Despair Labyrinth is, for what it is, a great game. Even if it is completely abandoned, there's an astounding amount of content just through replayability via the 8 different paths, and the gameplay is a simple but generally inoffensive affair that keeps things flowing. It's basic, but ambitious enough that I encourage anyone to give it a try. Number 8. Lust Doll Plus. Lust Doll Plus courts a very specific kind of RPG feeling, less like your typical turn-based affair and more akin to an immersive sim. It starts with a very modular game setup, character creation that can be adjusted down to each limb, followed by giving you the freedom to tackle almost every single kink in the game. It's dense and potentially a lot for a first-time player, but in a sense it's absolutely perfect for the experience. It benefits from this approach in the same way those immersive sims from the 90s did. Your character feels like your character, and no 2 playthroughs are the same. The gameplay itself is interestingly varied with plenty of options and ways to tackle each situation. Outside of combat, plenty of your stats are called upon to solve problems in various ways. While inside of combat, you're given some different contextual moves to keep things from always evolving the trading blows. It mixes itself up, but does unfortunately still feel slightly unengaging at times. The game presents its adult scenes mostly through text, with accompanying images for the more important events. The writing is certainly very good, evocative, and arousing without falling for the usual pitfalls of ungodly metaphors, but alongside all the text, I sometimes found it a bit difficult to really immerse myself in it. If you're in the right mood, though, the game gives you just enough visual feedback to paint a scene, letting your imagination run its course with the smaller details. And as one can guess from the entire room of toggleable kinks, you won't be starved for variety. Lus Doll accomplishes what it sets out to do very well. It's a dense experience with plenty of routes to take and ways to take them. If you want what it's going for, you won't be disappointed. Number 7. The Last Sovereign. RPGs are ripe territory for deconstruction. The genre has been around for ages. A lot of the earlier staples took from similar sources, and this led to them being known for following certain rigid structures. In the same way, adult RPGs sometimes fall into the same narrative traps, and The Last Sovereign is a direct deconstruction of those. Starting out, you play as Kai, Ivala's chosen hero to smite the incubus king plaguing mankind. Kai is full of himself, easily the MVP if you're starting a party, which includes a tired old soldier called Simon and a pretty young mage called Altina. And most of all, he is a complete and unrepentant pervert. And not in the funny anime way, he's downright lecherous. Every win is a sexual conquest in his eyes, even at the peril of his entire heroic journey. Despite these setbacks, Kai and his party reach the throne room only to find it's a trap. You can fight, but in the end you're beaten and Kai is drained of his soul by a succubus. You see, the entire prologue is a masterclass of bait and switch. The protagonist of the story is not Kai or any of the chosen heroes, who all look exactly alike. No, the hero is that tired, weary soldier, Simon, for whom Kai is just the last in a line of utterly useless heroes chosen by the church they just had to watch die. It's exquisitely done. No scene feels superfluous, they explore the characters involved very well. I definitely recommend giving the game a try. The gameplay is admittedly not much to write home about, and it has more plot than porn, but if you wanted to experience a truly great deconstruction of your typical adult RPG, then you'll be hard-pressed to find one better than The Last Sovereign. Number 6. Memoirs of a Battle Brothel. I previously talked about the idea of adult RPGs bringing in elements of immersive sims, and Memoirs of a Battle Brothel is an arguably even more polished example. As the latest facilitator of Moonfall's Guild, your job is to oversee the creation and maintenance of your own guild hall. The game is part base management and part immersive RPG. It's telling of the way the game handles character choice and creation that I went about 2 hours without seeing a single battle. If you build your character right, since the game features quite a good character creation, and picks certain choices, you can solve a lot of situations without having to actually fight. It's somewhat reminiscent of Fallout, how the game happily lets you go through as a silver-tongued charmer who never had to resort to the many guns they had in their pocket. Somehow the game's framing of the player character makes it feel even better. You're the facilitator. You're a smooth operator backed by battle vixens. Of course you'll be able to get by without dirtying your hands. Once you get to the gameplay though, it's quite well done, if a bit much initially. Even at lower levels, you have a surprising amount of options available to each character in the gridlocked, turn-based combat. You get a varied set of characters that let you run out your party though, each of the initial party fitting a particular role to help each other's weak points. The game's sexual content is made up of pixel animations, which are very aesthetically pleasing, fluid and expressive while keeping things simple and readable. However, there's a particular thing that the game does in regard that is amazing. Some characters have hard sexualities. Early on during the first major quest, you meet Kaywin, the mechanic. You can flirt with her, and if you're playing a female character, she'll let you down gently and say she's only into men. I was genuinely surprised. I've become quite used to adult games of this kind just not caring about that. But here was a character who I just flatly could not have that kind of relationship with because of the character I made. I really like it. It indicates a strong self-confidence to tell the player, no, this character isn't into guys or girls. If you want the elements of an open-world immersive sim but the tightness and sexy fun of an adult game, you should definitely give Memoirs of a Battle Brothel a chance. Number 5. Claire's Quest. Player choice is a big theme with Western adult RPGs, likely because it's a pretty big theme in Western RPGs in general. Claire's Quest comes with the idea with a very novel concept, an RPG with absolutely no combat. It's a take on a genre I haven't seen much. Funnily enough, the only immediate comparison that comes to mind is Disco Elysium. Though just about the only other thread the two games share is that you can make your player character just as much of a wreck. Claire's Quest follows Claire's horrible, no-good, bad day. Within the first 15 minutes, her idyllic town is ransacked by orcs, with all of her neighbors horribly butchered. Her mother tells her to run as far and fast as she can while she stays behind. With her father off fighting in the army, she's now effectively an orphan. From here, the game branches off into an almost uncountable number of potential paths. It's genuinely astounding. I played through the prologue a couple times, making slightly different choices, and ending up on almost completely different routes. The whole time you're building up stats, which only further adds onto the ways playthroughs can change radically. Claire's Quest shines in erotic scenes, with the CGs being beautifully done and having plenty of variations. The writing for them is fairly good, though infrequently prone to common porn writing pitfalls. There's a good variety of kinks up for grabs, with distinct paths through the game being centered around different fetishes. A church full of exorcist nuns that can grow dongles, rangers that dress up as monsters to fornicate with them. It's all decently varied and self-contained. If you like a kink, then a route will be up your alley. If you don't, you can just easily ignore it. If you're interested in an RPG where every one of your choices and approaches to a situation really feel like they matter, then Claire's Quest is definitely the one for you. It deals with some dark subjects in its attempt to paint a desperate world, but it won't leave you wanting if you're in the mood for that. Number 4. Star Knightess Aura. I played Star Knightess Aura for 5 hours, and the most risque scene I saw was clothed intercurl sex. The fact that this game is ranked number 4 despite this should tell you how good the game is. Star Knightess Aura starts with another classic twist on the Kill the Demon King plot, but unlike The Last Sovereign, it comes at it from a different angle of isekai. Aura and her friends are transported to another world to defeat the Demon King, but it goes horribly awry. The Demon King turns out to be their friend Richard, with Alicia also being his loyal right-hand demoness Lucella. Caught by surprise and bested, Aura's friends are killed. They're fine in the real world, though. And Aura herself is implanted with several curses that could only be broken with the death of the demon that caused them. Waking up in the real world, only Aura is able to remember what happened, finding herself returning to the fantasy world of Roa every time she goes to bed. At the end of the first day in Roa, we're thrown one last curveball: the introduction of our second player character, Alicia, otherwise known as Lucella. Having possessed Aura, she lives in her head and is free to cause havoc within certain boundaries. The erotic scenes are definitely worth the wait, even if they're absolutely as slow burn as you'd expect. Before the intercurl sex, the most erotic thing I'd seen was a panty flash. The context and framing around these scenes is definitely what carries them. Less an individual erotica to be enjoyed and more as pieces of an ever-growing mechanism. Star Knightess Aura is not a quick game, but honestly, if you're looking as a list of adult RPGs for a quick game recommendations, I don't know what to tell you. If you have the time to dedicate to it, though, you'll find yourself surprisingly engrossed in the way it weaves its narrative through an enticing gameplay loop. Playing both the hero and the villain at the same time is a sorely underutilized concept, and Star Knightess Aura plays it incredibly well. Number 3. Cloud Meadow. I initially went back and forth on whether Cloud Meadow should be on this list, not because it isn't great, in fact it's amazing, but rather I wasn't sure whether I could quite count as an RPG. It definitely has dungeon crawling with turn-based combat and countless party members, but it also has farm management, dating sim elements. At the end of the day though, I deemed that the RPG elements were excellent enough for it to earn a place on this list. And wow, did it earn its place. Cloud Meadow is a gorgeous looking game with a vibrant setting, enjoyable characters, and no shortage of things to do. You play as the last frontiersman after the Union, and in a choice I love, you can choose the pronouns separately from the masculine and feminine presentations available. And from there, you get acquainted with the town of Cloverton while building up your farm, both in terms of crops and monsters. In Cloud Meadow, farm management doesn't just involve the usual cycling of crops, but also keeping and maintaining monsters of various types. The RPG elements come into play when you explore Dungeon Island, consisting of many floors and plenty of monsters to fight. Each of your party members has an entirely different mechanic attached to them. It's generally one of the better RPGs I've played, even outside of adult games. But of course, the adult scenes need to be talked about. They're amazing. You have a selection of scenes you can earn with the monsters you keep at your farm that are rendered as smaller pixel animations. But what really takes the cake are the animations you get with the main characters from your party. Full scenes display with breathtakingly beautiful and smooth pixel animations, with almost completely different poses for the masculine and feminine players even. They're an utter treat for the eyes and will be worth the price of admission even if the rest of the game didn't happen to be great too. Cloud Meadow is currently in early access, but what's there is definitely worth picking up if the idea appeals to you even a little bit. Number 2, Ludus Labyrinth. The dungeon crawler is a classic subgenre that has somewhat declined in recent years. If you played a JRPG, it's likely it was inspired by wizardry, the grandfather of basically the entire RPG genre. Ludus Labyrinth isn't exactly wizardry, but it still carries itself strongly as a prime example of a dungeon crawling RPG. The game is delightfully light on story. There's a dungeon, you're a curious village girl, try not to succumb to the monsters and traps. Where the game excels is the sheer sense of exploration it pushes alongside the honestly incredibly robust and fun stance-based combat system. The abilities you gain help you feel like you're growing, but enemies will consistently throw you curveballs that prevent complacency in certain tactics. Use everything you have or end up as another fallen adventurer. Ludus Labyrinth has an amazing style that perfectly blends cuteness with sexiness, helping the sex scenes from feeling too dark. It also feels fun and almost flirty, even while your player character is being bullied and teased by the labyrinth's horny denizens. Most of the game's erotic scenes come from mid-combat cut-ins and grapple attacks, with game over CGs if you lose to certain important monsters. You'll likely see a lot of the CGs very frequently, but I found them good enough to barely even mind. Especially since the enemies get shuffled and slotted out quickly enough to just keep things moving along smoothly. Just as soon as you've seen the adorable bat nibble CG enough times I almost grow tired of it, you're being faced with another wave of monsters. When people ask me what my favorite adult game is, Ludus Labyrinth is one of the first that comes to mind. I purchased it as soon as I found out about its existence, and I finally remember playing it almost non-stop until completion. It's an amazingly fun game even without the loot content, though that side of things adds a lot to the experience. Play Ludus Labyrinth, you can thank me later. Number 1, Third Crisis. So what could possibly follow such a glowing review? After all, I basically said that number 2 of the list was one of my favorite adult games of all time, so what could number 1 be? The answer to that is Third Crisis, an early access game that immediately gripped me from the moment I started. You play as Jenna, otherwise known as the hero Vibe, who has been tasked with rescuing her girlfriend Karen from the villainous organization known as Patho. The plan goes awry when Patho's leader Leith unveils a new weapon. Defeated and captured, a fail-safe is tripped in her time-manipulating vibro suit that, unbeknownst to her, propels her 5 years into the future. This is where the game opens up. As the gravity situation is slowly unveiled to Jenna, Patho used their weapon to essentially take over the world, keeping the denizens pacified with its extreme aphrodisiac effects. Jenna has to find her way in the seedy town of Karlsberg as the player is given a choice of getting by, succumbing to the lust that now permeates society, or keeping herself clear-headed. The gameplay for a while is generally focused on day-to-day living, doing errands for your de facto owner, getting to know the town and its people, and learning what became of the world. It's actually a good little while until combat pops back up again, but it's definitely worth writing home about. It's tactical and turn-based, putting an emphasis on positioning and movement with a good deal of depth to it. The game has a gorgeous style that's easy on the eyes, and the animations are very well done when they crop up. The writing is snappy and strong, helped by the fact that Jenna is just a wonderfully snarky and intriguing personality in her own right. There's even plenty of collectible pinups to be found done by guest artists, just for that added bit of variety. In case you couldn't tell by my glowing review, Third Crisis is really good. It's equal parts exciting and gripping. With great writing and fun gameplay, even early access, the game has tons of content currently available, so it's definitely worth hopping on and experiencing. What an amazing example of what adult RPGs can be.